In 1914, near a small town in Germany called Bonn Oberkassel, quarry workers broke into a grave that had been sealed for 14,000 years. Inside were the remains of 2 humans, and lying right next to them, not a hunting tool, not food for the afterlife, but the bones of something else entirely. A creature with jaws close to a wolf's, but a skull shape that was already shifting into something new, as if nature had caught it mid-transformation. Paleontologists later confirmed it, one of the oldest dogs ever found buried alongside humans, and what makes it stranger is how it was placed there. Not discarded, not sacrificed, arranged with care, almost with ceremony, the way you'd lay a family member to rest. The real mystery isn't how this animal died. The real mystery is how, only a few thousand years after humans still treated every large 4-legged creature as a threat, a descendant of wolves ended up resting in human arms, mourned like one of their own. To answer that, we have to go back much further, to a point when there was no such thing as a dog in any sense we'd recognize, only wolves. And wolves, biologically, are not the kind of animal you can tame through willpower alone. Anyone who has tried raising a wolf pup from birth confirms the same thing. Feed it, care for it, love it in every way a human knows how to love a creature, and it will still grow up to be a wolf. Instinct doesn't disappear just because it was raised gently. Wildlife sanctuaries learned this the hard way over centuries. So if human intention wasn't the answer, what actually pulled an apex predator into our orbit? The theory with the strongest scientific backing right now flips the familiar story on its head. Humans didn't go out and capture wolves. The wolves selected us. As hunting groups became more efficient, they started producing something the ecosystem had never reliably offered before. Leftover bones, discarded meat, scraps nobody wanted. For an opportunistic scavenger like a wolf, that's the equivalent of a food source appearing out of nowhere every single night. But not every wolf dared to come close. The dominant, aggressive ones kept their distance from the fire and from humans. The ones willing to creep closer, to wait at the edge of the light, were simply the ones with a little less fear, a little more calm. And those were the ones who got fed, survived better, and had more offspring. Their pups inherited exactly the trait that had kept their parents alive. A little less fear of humans than the generation before. Generation after generation, an invisible selection pressure quietly reshaped an entire wolf population without a single human ever planning it. But how fast could this kind of change actually happen? The answer came from an unexpected place. A laboratory in the Soviet Union in the mid-20th century, where genetics was officially condemned as bourgeois pseudoscience, and researchers who pursued it risked serious trouble with the state. Geneticist Dmitry Belyaev found a workaround, framing his work as fur research for the fox farming industry. What he actually did was breed silver foxes based on exactly one trait: how relaxed they were around humans. Not appearance, not health, only calmness. Within just a few dozen generations, decades rather than millennia, the foxes began changing in ways nobody had predicted. Their ears went floppy, their tails curled, patches of white broke up their solid silver coats, their faces rounded out. They started seeking human attention, holding eye contact, making sounds closer to barks than howls. Belyaev had only selected for one behavior, but it turned out that in this species' genetic code, calmness and a whole cluster of physical traits were wired together on the same pathway. Pull one thread and the rest follow. Which means the wolves lingering near ancient campfires may have started looking dog-like far sooner than scientists once assumed. And while the wolves were changing, humans had to change too. At some point, somewhere, an ancient person chose not to throw a spear at the creature sitting at the edge of the firelight. Genetic evidence suggests this didn't happen just once, in just one place. There are independent signatures of this, pointing to multiple regions across Eurasia, as if these two species had a natural tendency to find each other whenever the conditions allowed it. Once humans realized a less wild wolf could warn them of danger or help track prey, the relationship accelerated in a new direction. Now humans were actively keeping the friendliest ones around, feeding them more, letting them sleep closer. What happened next inside this animal's brain is even stranger than the physical changes. A wolf, even one raised by humans from birth, almost never looks in the direction a finger is pointing. A puppy, even one with minimal human contact, does it almost instinctively. This isn't a learned behavior, it's written into the genes. Dogs also learn to hold a human's gaze, something that means the exact opposite in wolf society, a challenge, a warning that conflict is coming. In dogs, that same eye contact became a bridge instead. When a dog looks into your eyes, both of your brains release oxytocin, the same bonding hormone shared between a mother and her newborn. In one of evolution's strangest twists, a predator got rewired to crave connection with what should have been its prey. Which brings us back to that grave in Bon Oberkassel, 14,000 years ago. When most of human life revolved around surviving one more day, two people took the time, the effort, and the ceremony to bury a creature that offered no meat, no hide, no obvious use, nothing but its presence. That's not the relationship between an owner and a tool. That's something very close to what we'd now simply call love. From that grave to millions of living rooms today, where a dog is curled up at someone's feet, the emotional logic hasn't shifted much in 14,000 years. But there's a part of this story that gets talked about even less than the domestication itself. This relationship may have quietly shaped part of humanity's own success. Ancient communities with dogs likely had an edge in early warning against danger, in tracking prey, and by some research, in expanding into new territory more successfully than communities without them. In other words, this was never simply the story of humans taming an animal. It's the story of two species that, without either one planning it, evolved to become better versions of themselves by staying close to each other. A wolf stepped out of the darkness for a scrap of bone. 14,000 years later, its descendant is resting in an archaeological grave, laid down by the very hands of a species that once saw its ancestors as a mortal threat. It might be one of the strangest, slowest, and most unexpected trades in the entire evolutionary history of life on Earth.